So here we are on part 2 of the sort of studio improvising, how you would treat a song and use your improvisation skills to interpret what's going on. Sometimes people sort of write stuff down and it all gets lost in the sort of the theory and the mathematics of what's happening. So it pays to have that, all the sort of bits and pieces and the tips and tricks in your head, and only to bring them out when appropriate. So what I've done between the first film that I made and the second one is I've actually recorded a vocal line. Leaves fall in turn into a symbol of our... You know, this is just a sort of a sad ballad. It's just lyrics just written, you know, they're not particularly good words, but the point is there is a vocal line there that I have to work to. So I'm going to record some guitar now. So I'm just going to record this into the internal mic along with the piano, because the guitar has a nice trebly feel to it as well, whereas the piano is a bit darker, so we could use that to our advantage. Now, also with guitar, we can get the sort of broken chords like that, rather than you could use either. Now, I can also play some counter lines, only if they go with that vocal. I'm going to try the counter lines first. Try something like that. See if it goes with the vocal. So I'm going to turn the guitar slightly to face the iPad mic, and I've got a new track ready here. That's my vocal track there with the piano, the bass and the drums. Okay, here we go. Leaves fall and turn into a symbol of a love, leaving you, loving you, make the Lord above, and He guides me, hurts me, forever turning me to dust. Aside from the fact that my B string was sharp. Now, if I just go back and have a listen to that, some ideas were there, and you can see also, if you look at the trace of here, you can see the loudness. It was quiet and then it went louder and then back down again. And you can see that as a general rule of thumb across your tracks there. So dynamically, yes, something, you know, it's appropriate in that respect. But that guitar is starting too early. If I take that guitar track now and just strip the first 4 bars away, it will enable that verse to have a bit of a lift. Just makes a bit more sense. Now, I could also add some chords, but I've got to think about the inversions that I'm doing that make it different to the piano. So I could have some higher inversions in that second half, which then go through the chorus. So I could try something like that. Now, my chords at the moment, I'm just using the basic triads, but I'm improvising in terms of the inversion and the rhythm and the general feel of this. So I'm going to try doing something like this. Something like that, that makes it sound, well, I mean, let's just see what happens. Turning me So, after the chorus, I had a little sort of faster figure there. That may work if it's going into the second verse, which is a bit more exploratory, perhaps. But everything has to have its place. Everything has to have a sort of a purpose, rather than getting in the way. The best thing to do with things like this, especially when you're mixing, is to make parts there, but you don't notice them until they're now not there.
Loving you, make the Lord above, and He guides me, hugs me, forever turning me to dust.
So, there's something happening there, turning me to dust. That could also, all those faster figures could almost be the dust floating in the air. You know, you're making sort of similarities between your music, you're making sort of symbols of it. You know, playing with those vocals and trying to bring musical parts to the fore in that respect. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do some improvisation, some melodic improvisation, but this time I'm going to use my violin. Now this is kind of tricky because it could very easily go wrong in terms of there being too much. So I've got to listen to that vocal and I'm going to answer that vocal with some melodic ideas. So I've got to be very, very sensitive to what the song is about and how those vocals go. So I'm going to just quickly listen to the vocal line and see where I can put something.
Leaves fall and turn into a symbol of a love.
And it can be absolutely minimal stuff, and in fact minimal, it's pretty good. If you can get the right three notes in the right place and make them sound nice, the job is done. Indeed, you may record something and decide that it's not appropriate. Perhaps it could be appropriate if it was the second verse, for example. You could leave the first verse very minimal and bring stuff in the second verse. But I've only got one verse and chorus here, so the principles, they can apply whether this is a second verse or a first verse. So,
leaves fall and turn into a symbol of a love. Loving you, make the Lord above, and He guides me, hugs me, forever turning me to dust.
So there, I had the violin going for most of it, but the dynamic range of the instrument meant that it could almost disappear from the mix in the very quietest notes, and it basically had a sort of a top line role sometimes. Then other times it was more of a harmony part that was just there in the background.
Leaves fall and turn into a symbol of a love. Loving you.
So the leaving you, loving you, that was more of a harmonic role where the violin was just keeping notes going underneath. Now, Of course, if you've got lots of tracks like you would have on GarageBand, you could separate those two things. So you have just the solo part, and then you have the harmony parts on separate tracks, which means that you can treat them separately in terms of effects, tone, compression, reverb, etc. So just listening further forward into that build up to the chorus.
Make the Lord above, and He guides me, hurts me, forever turning me to dust.
Now, gaps between the choruses, maybe in the verse, or any gaps that are a bit longer, it could be the time to improvise. And the violin here is, of course, can make it a sad sounding instrument, so it might be appropriate here. But notice the fact that I didn't go lots and lots of notes and trying to put all your riffs and all your licks and all your this into a recording. It's much better if you've got a few notes and you're making a contour that really finishes off that verse. Of course, it might not be appropriate at all, but if you do something like that, make sure that it is really, really, down tempo, down sort of in terms of complexity. So in the third part of this, I'm going to take the vocals away and I'm going to play an entire solo over this and talk about that and talk about the pitfalls and problems that you may find.